It's year 2 for Brian Callahan with the Tennessee Titans. He's armed with Cam Ward, the #1 overall pick. What does this roster look like around them? We're breaking that down for you today on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast.
You are Locked On NFL Scouting with the Draft Dudes, your daily podcast for NFL and college football scouting. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's better than this? It's guys being dudes here on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast. We're the Draft Dudes. I'm Joe Marino from Locked On Bills. He's Kyle Crabbs from Locked On Dolphins. And we are your NFL experts here with you daily to talk team building across the league on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast with the Draft Dudes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Want to issue a big thank you, shout out, and welcome to our everydayers. Those of you who never miss a single episode, we appreciate y'all being here very, very much.
Happy Monday.
Happy Monday.
You. First week of July this week, technically finishing June today. And we're in our last week of roster assessments across the NFL. We've done 28 teams. It's number 29 here and now.
It's exciting. And that means it's AFC South week.
That's right.
Titans, Colts. No, it's Titans,
Jags,
Jaguars, Colts, Texans.
That's right.
That's the week. Today we focus on the Titans. And we'll do what we've done for every team. We've studied the roster. We put every player into different buckets. The buckets are roster cornerstone, quality starter, rookie, sufficient starter, replacement level, quality depth, non-roster caliber, incomplete evaluation, and a practice squad developmental player. Each bucket has a different point value assigned to it. Every position is weighted differently in terms of importance. And by the end of this week, we'll have all these teams scored, and we'll be able to really talk about how they stack up, both overall and from a positional perspective, from a unit perspective. And we'll talk Titans today. We'll get into the back seven on defense. We'll get into the trenches, but we start with the offensive skill players.
It's time to tighten up, Joe. We're going to tighten up here looking at these wide receivers. Let's start with the wide receivers, because I think this is a really interesting mix of veteran players, role players, young players, upside bets, maybe high floor, low ceiling players. There's going to be somebody that shakes loose out of this group that I'd be keeping my eye on the waiver wire for when it's all said and done. It kind of reminds me in some ways of the New England wide receiver room, where there's a lot of opportunity that should be considered wide open. You kind of have a marquee established veteran player in Tennessee. It's Calvin Ridley. But then you have late stage career Tyler Lockett. You've got Van Jefferson as a role player. You got 2 4th-round picks in DK and IMMINENT that are athletic, like physical athletic freak combination type guys. Restrepo as a UDFA obviously has a lot of chemistry with Cam Ward. Treylon Burks, former 1st-round pick. That's 7 names.
2 of those aren't going to make it, probably.
Probably not. Now, you might keep 6. Some teams have kept 6 and kind of done the juggling of the other skill players and how the numbers, you make it work. But I love the value that they got with IMMINENT. Obviously slid some medical stuff there that contributed to a slide there. And then DK as a height, weight, speed guy gives you 2 young players that you let those guys compete and you hope that they can stay healthy. And I think that can bring a new dynamic to this room as far as what they can do on the outside.
I'm very interested to see how Calvin Ridley meshes with Cam Ward. I think in one hand, I'm impressed with Calvin Ridley and the production that he was able to have last year in a passing offense that was just kind of tough to watch, but still a productive player. And obviously Cam Ward comes in and #1 overall pick, best quarterback in the draft, slotting into this West Coast style system. How does that chemistry develop, and how much more consistent play can we get out of Ridley? Because I feel like the highs are really good, but there was some variance in his play, and it's kind of hard to separate how much that's Ridley, how much of that's you didn't have real quarterback play year one in the new scheme.
Now, come on.
Yeah. Well, Will Levis took a lot of snaps too there, Kyle Crabbs. So I'm curious to see where he's at. And then, of course, like for Tyler Lockett and the career that he's had, you mentioned late stage Tyler Lockett. I think it's a good opportunity for him in this type of passing offense where his route running can be on display, work from the slot. I don't think they're going to really ask him to do a lot of vertical stuff, but as a short to intermediate separator, I think he can help this offense. It's just a matter of like, what can we realistically expect out of him? I still graded him as a sufficient starter, but it'll be interesting to see how those guys settle in. And I like the young players in DK and Ayumanor. And I'd almost be hoping, if I were a Titans fan, that Van Jefferson and Traylon Burks are kind of the guys that got stiff-armed out of this equation, and you can lean the young players and Ridley and Lockett.
Yeah, it's because that would still give you not all developing players around a developing quarterback. And then the Restrepo dynamic, it's no guarantee that he makes the roster.
Right.
But the fact that there is such a pre-existing chemistry between him and Cam Ward, I think is kind of hard to ignore. And I know exactly what I'm going to get with Van Jefferson, right? Like the story's been played out, right? So Traylon Burks holdover from the head coach and the general manager have changed since that pick was made in 22.
Yeah.
I'm in the same boat as you, where if I could only keep 5, I would want it to be Ridley, who I have as a quality starter, Lockett, who I have as a sufficient level starter, the 3 rookies. But it's a lot of inexperience that you're betting on, especially when you consider some of the other places that this team is young, including is 4th round draft choice in Gunnar Helm at tight end to go with Josh Wiley, who was a 5th round choice in 23, and Chig Okonkwo still on a rookie contract. Now he's played some meaningful football. I think his role, the role that he can play as a receiving tight end, is attractive, but Gunnar Helm's got a lot riding on him being, I think, winning the inline position should be the aspirations for Tennessee. Yeah. But again, that makes a lot of youth in the pass catching rooms if that's how it all plays out.
Yeah, I still like the makeup of that tight end room. I think Chig is a player that is really obviously athletic and can really produce with the ball in his hands, and I think he'll flourish a bit more here with some stability around him and hopefully better quarterback play. I think the piece of this offense that might be underrated, and I think one of the most underrated players in the league, is Tony Pollard. I put him as a quality starter. I think it's time to recognize him as one of the best backs in the game. That's 3 consecutive seasons for him, over 1,300 yards.
He's a well-rounded player.
He really is, man. He can catch the ball, obviously. He's got a speed dynamic. He's physical and runs the ball hard. I really, really like Tony Pollard. He's back-to-back years over 300 touches as well. And I know he had like the injury, but he still played in at least 15 games every single season of his career. I'm a big Tony Pollard fan. I even gained more and more appreciation for what he did last year, where it's like, nobody's afraid of this passing offense, and this guy's still making it happen. So put me down for being a Tony Pollard stan, and kind of I hate to call him an X factor, but you kind of sleep on him in this offense and take him for granted. I think he's a stud. And I think behind this offensive line, and kind of like where I think it's going with the O-line coaching that's available, I think this could be his best year coming up. With a quarterback like Cam that can run. Obviously, Will Levis could, but I don't think he respected the throwing ability for that to matter as much. Yeah. I'm excited for Pollard this year.
Yeah, and then Tyjae Spears is obviously a very talented player. So they've got talent in the backfield, running behind an offensive line, like you mentioned, that there's been a lot of investments here as far as what the free agent contract looked like for Cushenberry. Obviously had the injury last year. They spent handsomely on Dan Moore in free agency. They bring in Kevin Zeitler as well to go with a couple of first-round picks to round out that group. Obviously, we're just finishing the skill group now, but before we get too far into the offensive line, we mentioned wide receiver grades. I had Ridley as a quality starter, Lockett as a sufficient level starter. I had Okonkwo as a sufficient level starter. I had Pollard as a quality starter, and I still had Spears as an incomplete evaluation, but like if you wanted to tell me you graded him as a sufficient level starter, I would not argue with you on that front either.
Yeah, I had it the same, except for Spears, I put him in quality depth.
Okay.
So. All right, we started talking a little O-line. We'll talk a lot of O-line here next, including the defensive line. So trenches coming up, folks. Be sure to stick with us. You ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning for a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. When I first started using Monarch, I realized just how much I was spending on food delivery. Now I budget smarter and I save more. It's pretty surprising how certain spending habits add up, and Monarch makes it easy to identify them. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year.
So we kind of teased this offensive line group already, but the starting five projected is Dan Moore, new addition in free agency from Pittsburgh, Peter Skoronski, 2023 first-round draft choice, Lloyd Cushenberry, handsomely compensated free agent center from Denver, signed last offseason, Kevin Zeitler, new arrival from Denver, previously in Baltimore before that, and then J.C. Latham. And when I ask myself what the win is for Tennessee last year from an offensive line perspective, it's the two guys that pushed 1,100 snaps were Latham and Skoronski. Like that in and of itself, if you were going to pick two guys, right, like Cushenberry got banged up, Raduns took a lot of snaps. You had Brunskill who took a lot of snaps. It was over 600 snaps that he took. For the longevity of the group, your two former first-round draft choices playing on the offensive line, they got all the reps.
Yeah, it's good.
And that's a win I can take away from what was a disappointing season for Tennessee last year.
Yeah, and obviously still a whole lot of ceiling to develop there. Year 2 for Latham, year 3 for Skoronski, but year 2 under Coach Callahan. And we know the ability he has to develop offensive linemen. And then really over the last 2 years, you've supplemented a lot of draft capital with, some meaningful free agent additions. Zeitler, I didn't have it on my bingo card for him to come to Tennessee, but it's a good opportunity for him to start and be a veteran that's, I think, will benefit playing next to Latham, who's, I think we're understanding there is that he's going to move back to right tackle with Dan Moore in the mix at left tackle, who's played a lot of snaps. And they obviously saw something they really like in Dan Moore. I think in one hand, you watched his career in Pittsburgh and you felt like they were very intentional about trying to move on, but they never really could, right? Whether it was injuries, the guy's always in the lineup. And Tennessee's intel, and I respect Bill Callahan and the offensive line mind that he is. They wanted him to come over and be the left tackle here. And so I'm definitely intrigued. I'm encouraged. I think it's a good group. I think they've, for too long, relied on players that, whether it was Nicholas Petit-Frere or hoping that Jalen Duncan would be a quick answer, or Dylan Raduns. Feels like there's been some guys here that just hasn't really materialized in the ways that they wanted to. And now they've hedged that with some veterans that obviously are going to be taking a lot of snaps here. So this group, for a team that's going to trot out the number 1 overall pick at quarterback this year, I feel pretty good about what's in front of them in terms of the starting 5.
Yeah. And then Jackson Slater is a 5th-round draft choice from Sacramento State. I think it's a great stylistic fit. Him and Skoronski potentially at long-term guards. You potentially groomed to take over for Zeitler, who signed the 1-year deal. Yeah. You have the potential for what would be a really young nucleus.
Yeah.
Too. This is not, oh, hey, we piecemealed it together and took some scrap heap guys and threw together a group. Because as you said, there's a balance. Now, there's still some questions as far as what does Cushenberry look like this year, right? Dan Moore playing to the contract expectations could be a challenge. Feels kind of Jawan Taylor-y as far as who he was versus the contract that he got. Jawan Taylor obviously got the big contract from Kansas City a couple years ago. But it's all about getting a group that you feel like you can push play with Cam, right? And that being the objective that you're looking at these decisions through. I totally get it. I had Dan Moore graded as a quality depth player. I have Peter Skoronski I moved him out of incomplete evaluation. I have him down currently as a sufficient level starter with the opportunity to go up. I have a healthy Lloyd Cushenberry as a quality starter. I have Kevin Zeitler as a quality starter. And J.C. Latham I have as an incomplete evaluation because it was just a one-year play.
I have it the same, except for I put a sufficient starter label on Dan Moore. I think ideally he would be a swing, but based on the investment and experience he has in Callahan, I gave him the benefit of the doubt there.
I get it.
One other note here on this offensive line when it comes to depth. I know we pointed out Jackson Slater, Jalen Duncan's still here. But this mix of Oli Udoh, Brendan Jamies, and Blake Hance, I mean, not a lot of, those aren't preferred starters for any team, but those are guys that are like 29 years old. I think all of them are right in that 28, 29, 30 range. Have a lot of experience in the league. Not maybe a ton of game experience, but you have veterans behind your starters here, and we know that obviously they had to use a lot of their depth in 2024.
Yeah, and I think Jackson Slater, I think, becomes a really important piece because we've looked at some of these offensive lines, and it's like, hey, man, if you've got a very clear sixth guy, that if somebody has to come in and play, you can kind of rearrange the front five. I don't necessarily get the same warm and fuzzies with the prospect of shuffling the guys in the front five.
No, I think it's a good call out. I think you have your left tackle, your left guard, your center, your right guard, your right tackle.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's not a super interchangeable group. I agree with that.
Defensive line.
Go ahead and talk about Devondre Sweat, man. Go ahead.
Well, let's start with Jeffrey Simmons. Lean Jeffrey Simmons this offseason. I don't know if you saw, he trimmed down a little bit.
Not mad about it.
It's a scary thought for
Yeah.
how explosive he already is. But let's talk about Devondre Sweat. I love Devondre Sweat.
Quick best shape of your life season comment. Let's get to the real meat and potatoes here.
Man, and you aren't kidding about meat and potatoes. For the conditioning concerns with Devondre Sweat, Joe, 700 snaps last year.
That's a ton for a player of that profile. You might have, honestly, if I said, Kyle, what's the over-under on Devondre Sweat's last year at this time? Devondre Sweat snaps. If I said over-under this year, last year at this time, good Lord, you'd think I'd talk for a living. What would you say, 350? Something like that? 300?
I'd have gone over 350.
400?
I'd say maybe 450 would have been where I'd set the over-under at.
So he smashed it by 300 snaps?
Yeah.
Good on him.
Man, you just keep him motivated. What a very specific role to play. But the role that he play, he is a monster. I want to be pretty clear here because I'm going to invoke a name that's a very successful player.
Oh, good.
And in ways in which I don't think Devondre Sweat ever will be. Is Devondre Sweat the most challenging size defensive tackle from a run defending perspective that we've seen since Vita Vea?
Ooh, I was sitting there thinking what name you were going to invoke.
I'm not going to go Dexter. I'm not Dexter Lawrence.
No, I thought it was going to be Vince Wilfork. That's where I thought you were going to go.
But as far like Vita has a pass rush profile and I think an explosiveness.
Yeah, but
like a range explosiveness that Devondre is not going to, but just raw power, size. You put him over the center, he is an overwhelming matchup.
Can we do Snacks Harrison?
That's fine.
That's where I'd go. Because I think that's a little bit more
in his subsect of defensive tackle.
Right. And for the pass rush piece, I think you still get the same, oh my gosh, this might be the best run stopping defensive tackle in the league. But with the appropriate lens for the pass rush, where Vita Vea is getting 50+ pressures every year.
That's why I gave the disclaimer in the event that any of the 4,000+ Bucks fans that watched the YouTube video on Thursday last week came and watched the Tennessee and say, you're comparing them to who? It's not a comparison, but it's that raw, unbridled power at that size and short area explosiveness that just makes him so difficult to move.
How did anybody run the ball in Texas with Collins and Sweat? They were there at the same time, right?
Dude, and then they had another two. They had Broughton this year.
Jeez, man.
And they had another one that
Quinn Ewers. Texas should have had a couple of natties. I don't know how it didn't happen.
I will not.
I think I just said his name. That's the answer. All right, we just scratched the surface on the defensive line. We'll talk all defense here on the other side of it. Folks, be sure to stick with us.
It's a nice looking front that they have in Tennessee. I like the defensive line outlook. Joseph Day, Sweat, Simmons, Draymond Jones coming in, Femi Oladejo, and the second-round draft choice. Arden Key's become a nice role player.
Yeah, for sure.
I think you're maybe missing the ceiling player on the edge, kind of like the marquee edge guy.
Yeah.
But Jeffrey Simmons, cutting down a little bit, has always had alignment versatility. I think Draymond Jones has some alignment versatility. If they could just play with like that power presence with heavy-handed guys up front, I think that will be in their wheelhouse. And then it becomes the development of Oladejo as kind of the key X factor for their edge room.
Yeah, I like this group. Draymond Jones, another addition to this front. Very versatile player. I mean, Joseph Day, Sweat, Simmons, boy, that's tough to run on that.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll say this. I thought Tennessee's defense overall was really good last year. It was just probably the team that played the worst complementary football I've ever seen in my life. And eventually they just wore out at some point. And when you're not playing good offense, you're playing terrible special teams. It's a lot on your defense, and eventually they wore down. Let me ask you this as it relates to the front, because I feel like you're becoming well-versed on this coaching tree of Mike McDonald and Anthony Weaver, Denard Wilson, all these very similar coaches. Yep. Like, what do you think about this front? Like, what you think that they want to get done, and what you like about it, and like what's missing? Because I feel like, in some ways, minus the edge piece, but like for the kind of the inside guys, hand of the dirt guys, this looks a little bit like what Miami has going on with some of the styles of players.
So I think the challenging piece that I think they're missing, and they have it with Lorenzo Carter to a certain degree, and then Oladejo and his background as a guy who's played off the ball, I think is going to be really important here, because these sim pressure schemes, you're looking for guys that are comfortable dropping out and playing underneath zones, hook zones, spot zones in the middle of the field, take away hot throws where you're manipulating where I'm showing pressure and I'm manipulating the protection scheme, but then the pressure is going to come the other way, and then the quarterback's going to understand that they're bringing one away, so I got to throw hot, but the hot's to the side that we were set up in the first place, so, and then we were dropping guys into that lane, right? Like that kind of cat and mouse scheme. And if you don't have the right guys to execute it in the underneath, there's going to be space for spot throws to just get the ball out of your hands and find easy completions and kind of work your way down the field. So I think that's the piece of this, especially when you look at the secondary and what they have in potentially Snead and McCreary and Hooker and Kevin Winston and Xavier Woods is a guy who you just can't get rid of from somebody's starting lineup every single year, right? Like Brownlee's a really promising player. The secondary, I think, gives you a lot of matchup opportunity to play the games with people. It's, for me, the underneath zones with the off-ball linebackers and then the edge guys that have to drop out when you run simulated pressures is kind of the element for me that I don't know I have the answers that I feel like they're going to need to be running at a really high level this year.
So we're kind of missing a marquee, like a game changer off the edge. A lot on Jeffrey Simmons to be a big-time pressure player for this team. Some young players, like you mentioned, Oladejo is a guy that I was a big fan of coming out. Key, don't sleep on Key. He's become a good player.
Major Key, right? Is DJ Khaled?
Is that what he says?
He has a few.
Oh, I thought there was other. Yeah, that's the one I know from him. Yeah. Linebacker, a lot of young players, right? Cedric Gray, Otis Reese. I think one of those two will probably be the running mate to Cody Barton, who I think will be one of the starters. I think for a front that wants to get involved with sim pressures, I think Cody Barton's a guy that kind of had some experience doing that last year with Vance Joseph in Denver. Good cleanup player. But I don't think you look at this linebacker room and feel like there's a lot of known commodities here. You have a sufficient starter in Barton, and then I have everyone else as an incomplete evaluation. And none of those guys are particularly high pedigree investments, if you will.
Yeah, I think that's the concern. They'd love to see Cedric Gray, right, as a second year round draft choice, kind of emerge and seize that opportunity. But that's the part for me. All the questions I have about Tennessee is kind of the middle core, right? Because today's game, NFL wise, is there's a lot of it's pace and space, right? And you try to stretch teams out, and then your conflict defenders, because we're playing a lot of too high safety shell presentations, the stress gets put down on the second level players as compared to the guys on the back end and like the high post free safety. That's not really where the stress exists anymore. So if you can get McCreary, if you want to play McCreary in the nickel, I think that helps a little bit. I think some of your safety presence, especially the addition of a Kevin Winston, if he's fully back and healthy from the season-ending injury that he had last year, which happened very early in the season. So there should be some optimism there. I think those kinds of players can help. But that is, as we just got done talking about, as far as like the DNA of the sim pressure defenses, this is where, for me, middle of the field zone coverage effectiveness is going to dictate a lot of, I think, the success that they have, especially when a lot of their best pass rush is interior guys where you can kind of push and create piles. So the question becomes, who becomes your bucket getter as a pass rusher off the edge? And if you can't speed that process up and you can just muddy pockets inside, do you have the guys that are going to anticipate and have the peripheral vision and then have the athleticism to make the plays in space?
Amani Hooker's a good player.
He's a good player.
Yeah, I think that's a big part.
Stop underdrafting these safeties just because they run 4.55 and aren't super tall, right? Like,
dude, he's been on such a good path. I put him down as a quality starter.
I did as well. Yep.
I think I'm excited for Kevin Winston. I thought he was on such a good path, a physical player that hunts the ball, man. Hunts physical. I love everything about the way he plays. And Jarvis Brownlee's a guy that I love coming out as well. I was glad to see him get some early run and some experience last year. There's a lot riding on L'Jarius Sneed, right? Come out with some quotes lately saying he's healthy, and obviously last year was a disaster for him after the contract. I mean, it wasn't a huge trade haul that they gave up, but there's a big commitment to L'Jarius Sneed, and he needs to be an answer, man. That because their depth at corner on the outside, it's what Darrell Baker and Amani Oruwariye, and I think you'd love to know that Sneed and Brownlee and McCreary are the three on the field primarily for this defense. I think one of my concerns though is corner depth.
Well, and then from Sneed's perspective too, this age 28 season with a knee issue, right? Like,
yeah,
your opportunities to get quality returns feel like you're on the clock with that. So this is, I think, a big year for Sneed in more ways than one. Never mind because you're worried about the depth that you have at corner, which I think is fair to call out, but you don't want to put up roadblocks for your young players, but could you get there? There's some veteran corners that are out there if you wanted to dip your toe into that pool. And that, I think the challenge will be, there's some teams out there, Miami, Green Bay, that if they wanted to sign a corner, like you could walk in off the street and be a starter for that.
Yeah. And Shaq Griffin's off the menu now, right? So
correct. He went back to Seattle.
I always wondered if the Tennessee was the type of team that should have made the investment in a L'Jarius Sneed. They had they earned the number one overall pick last year, right? So
they didn't help your questions with.
No, not at all, right? And I think those are the types of things, though, when you look at a team in their life cycle, there's certain teams that there's certain moves that they just shouldn't make. And hopefully, I mean, I think defensively, this, like I said, I thought this unit played pretty well. Hopefully they can get some more complementary football, but how did the timelines match up for L'Jarius Sneed entering his age 28 season with knee trouble and when the Tennessee Titans are going to be in the conversation to be contending?
Are you privy where Tennessee ranked last year in free agent spending guaranteed at signing?
Number one, I would guess, pretty high.
Number two,
okay,
in the NFL and guaranteed at signing for the 2024 free agent cycle, behind only the Atlanta Falcons.
And certainly Kirk Cousins was a huge part of that equation for Atlanta.
Yeah.
And it's gotta be.
So if it wasn't for Kirk Cousins, Tennessee handed out $126 million guaranteed at signing last offseason, which is why I appreciate looking at this roster now and seeing the players. A lot of the players that we're most excited about are young players that came in on rookie contracts or are draft picks or were draft choices last year, and certainly felt like the strategy this year was not to go completely hog wild. This year, Tennessee ranked 8th in guaranteed at signing, but it was like $40 million less. It was like 50% less than what it was last year for spending.
Well, I think Tennessee learned
22 contracts this year versus last year. I think it was like 12.
That's interesting as well. That's very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I think they learned a lot of lessons. And I think they'll be better for everything they went through last year. Ultimately, it comes down to development of Cam Ward.
That's right. That's the player we did not talk about at all. Is probably the biggest piece of the puzzle, right?
Yeah.
Rookie quarterback come in. Sometimes you get Jaden Daniels. Sometimes you get Zach Wilson, right?
I was wondering who you were going to slander. You had a choice to make there. You went with Zach Wilson.
You Trey Lance. You want me to go Trey Lance? You want me to go?
There you go.
You want me to go rookie season Trevor Lawrence? I mean, there's a nice teaser for tomorrow. And got the Jacksonville Jaguars tomorrow. Lots of intrigue in this division. And I have a hot take for Thursday when we do the Texans that I think every team should feel as though they have an opportunity this year in this division because of kind of the dynamics of the AFC South. So you have that to look forward to the rest of the week. I'm Kyle Crabbs. You can keep it locked in right here on Locked On NFL Scouting, joined as always by Joe Marino. We appreciate you guys for checking out the show, but that is it for us today. We are out of here. Enjoy the rest of your Monday. We'll talk to you all again soon.